And there are some myths we are talking about. So when they talk about blockchain, what are in your mind? Some people
Mm,
ask whether it's a cryptocurrency, is
yeah.
it a bitcoins? And some friends also thought maybe it's just timely fight. So it's just a fashion. It'll be over soon. If it were 4 years ago, I may be agree with them. But nowadays, I doubt about it. I think there are still many myths behind it and about blockchain. I think Harry is also agree with it, right?
Mm.
Yeah, but what Harry says is unimportant. It's you women that that should set the tone here.
Yes, but from what we've learned, Jessica, Sophia, myself, and others, that of course there's public and private blockchain. Blockchain is not the same as cryptocurrency and is definitely not Bitcoin. We know this, right? We also went through this
Mm-hmm.
last time. So there are
Mm-hmm.
so many myths out there, but I think Harry, yes, I think Jessica is correct. We ask you to make sure that we go through all these details and we debunk the myths, as we say in the US. Jessica, what do you think?
Totally agree. I think Harry is an expert of that. Since the day I started to get to know him, he started on what is a blockchain. And after 9 years, I think I still can feel his deep love with blockchain. So let's invite our expert to maybe share more about
Mm.
blockchain with us.
Yeah,
Harry?
before we
Oh,
do
okay.
that,
Something.
maybe we use a warm up time for warm up, and the first people started already. So great, guys, you already used the QR code or the link in the chat, which I posted there. And yeah, we want, of course, we heard now from Jessica and also from Asma, what are maybe curiosities and buzzwords which are on our minds, but also we want to know what's in your mind when you think about myth and curiosities around blockchain, right? And it's cool to see that the word cloud is growing, right? And especially the words in the middle are words which you mentioned several times. You can choose 3 words in the list if you want, in the Mentimeter list. Let us know if it's something is not working, but it looks good because more and more people answer, and there's movement in our word cloud. Yeah, and of course, we will also use these words for creating further content for the next sessions, right? Because these are often words which, yeah, which creates maybe strange stories or fears or curiosities around the topic of decentralized technologies. And hopefully we can help to, yeah, to explain them a bit better or link them to really problems and stories in our life. So it's cool to see, and we give you a few more seconds. I mean, interesting. We have really a wide range of words, right? So we can see there's a lot of topics are linked to the buzzword blockchain, but we can really see transparency, crypto, Bitcoin are in the heads of many people. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. And I leave the survey open. So for all the people who need a bit more time, I will share that later again. Yeah, and maybe also during the session, if you have a feeling, now I want to add a new word, do this. It's a dynamic word cloud. And now we move back to the presentation. And as Jessica said, it would be cool, Harry, if you can help us to understand DIDs, right? What is that?
Yes. So today I'll speak about something that on first notice is not directly connected to blockchain, even though it did appear in the word cloud and it wasn't me who put it there. So it's identities and how identities are used on the one hand from the technical perspective to how decentralized identities, so it's a new decentralized way of handling and proving identities, are used in conjunction together with blockchain. That's a technical perspective, but in a way much more importantly, why identities, signatures, and credentials are essential and at the center for any and all commercial transactions that you can possibly think of. And next, and I'll start off here. Basically, blockchain is incredibly beautifully in itself, tamper-proof, secure, can be trusted. It's a perfect golden, unbroken record of statements, and I say statements, not facts, and I will get back to that. So it's a completely unbroken record of statements or transactions that have been put into that chain. So if that chain is completely self-contained, and Bitcoin, for instance, is completely self-contained, there is essentially nothing, no input into it. It is not related to any real world business. It is simply you send these Bitcoins, which are minted from inside of the blockchain, and then you acquire them somehow, and then you send them to somebody. So it's completely self-contained ball. So that is in itself very pure and nice and well, but any other blockchain is just a record keeper. So most of you might have heard about the typical supply chain example. It's a favorite example for me in the sense of where the misunderstanding lies and where I believe a lot of expectation readjustments will happen. Many, many people for years now have been saying, oh, supply chain, that is the perfect use case for blockchain. Now I can finally prove that whatever cobalt I put into my battery was not produced with child labor. Now I can finally prove that the clothes I am bringing to the market have been produced in environmental friendly environment and the labor has been treated according to human rights. So we're going to make the world a better place. Well, making the world a better place is of course a good thing. But if anybody believes that a technology can make the world a better place on itself, then seriously wake up. Because what is blockchain? Blockchain is a technology that is very, very powerful, and it just keeps flawless, unbroken record of things. That's what it does, and it does that very, very beautifully. But if you run a business, and now you're booking things, so then your blockchain is a bookkeeping system, and in it now, whatever you write into it will stay in there. By the time you end up getting an invoice for whatever you booked, and even more, by the time you're going to want to pay that invoice, which you just got booked, you better make sure that the facts behind the invoice are true. Meaning to say, if you get an invoice for 10 kilometers used on a shared car, which maybe 15 minutes, 10 kilometers on that shared car, and you get an invoice for that, sure, I'll pay that if I drove those 10 kilometers in 15 minutes. But I want proof of that, obviously. Otherwise, there's no way I'll pay. So how do I make sure that whatever I book into this distributed ledger, into this distributed bookkeeping system, is actually true? So last time we basically hinted at it, and bloXmove whole business model is based on exactly that. That we conduct business end to end, we're totally hyper automated. We make sure everything is completely captured automatically, all the way down to your accounting, your financial settlement, etc. Now, next, please. All of that is not given by blockchain. Why? Contracting lies at the center of bookkeeping. You cannot bookkeep, you cannot receive money if there's not a contract behind it. The very simple example that everybody will understand, if you're a corporation and I send $100,000 US to your bank account, that's not money you received. That's a big headache you got right there. Because first of all, you will never be able to touch that money. And second of all, you will have the tax authorities and the regulators and internal revision chasing you. Where does that money come from? You better be able to explain where that money comes from. Which means if you don't have a context, a business transaction, a contract within which this money is used to pay, then it's considered money laundering or criminal activity, but you're definitely not allowed to keep that money. So therefore, it's always important when you handle money in a corporate world, you always need to look at where does that money end up. Companies count the money in their books, obviously. The tax man counts the money in your books. The internal auditors, the bank regulator, counts the money in your books. They don't look at your cashier. So how does such a book look? Very simply put, it's got a transaction where it says, Sophia and me had some kind of contractual agreement. This is Sophia's identity. This is where I can reach her for tax purposes, for liability purposes, etc. I need her full name. There is no data protection on the accounting level. That also needs to be understood. GDPR is weaker than accounting. Accounting, it means I have your full identity with your address and I need to keep it for 10 years. No such thing as privacy here. This is needed for accounting records. I need your full identity, I need your signature, and I need the full identity and the signature of the other side. Otherwise, there is no way I'm allowed to book any money. So coming back to the original story that also for supply chain, where if you do not assure the physical reality of whatever you're writing into the blockchain, you're creating completely false precision. You have extremely high precision on the digital level, but what you're writing in there falls very square and fair under bullshit in, bullshit out. And to avoid the bullshit in part of this, you now need to look at how does a business transaction look. And any and all business transaction in the online commerce can pretty much be expressed by this identity triangle, or in general by the very simple statement, a contract, and that lies at the center of any service delivery, and that most of all lies at the center of any money being sent based on an invoice, is always based on the two parties consenting with their signature to the terms and conditions giving, and the two parties need to be identified, and those two parties are either a human or an enterprise. The vehicle and the car and the device comes in as an extra component when you now want to hyper automate this whole thing, and then all of a sudden your vehicle can automatically pay the charging station, and the charging station can automatically negotiate with the vehicle, for instance, fully automated charging, etc. But only on all of that, you can never book it fully knowing that it's correct if you don't know physically in the real world, in the world you can touch, who were the physical actors, who were the players that actually conducted this transaction, which you now put into your distributed ledger bookkeeping. That is why identity and signature is so crucial if you really want to put blockchain to a useful use case. Okay?
So Harry, just for me, because we've discussed this, and I just want to make sure that we all understand this as you are presenting. You and I have two companies, we transact. First, we have an agreement. Once we have an agreement, though, it's not like it used to be, because I remember days, yes, I'm old enough to remember, where it took 5 days for a transaction to go from one bank to the next. And still to this day, some traditional banks take 2 to 3 days for a transaction to be complete. You may see it that it's there, but behind the scene is 2 to 3 days. But with blockchain, it's instantaneous. Contract is there, but it's instantaneous.
Yes, instantaneous, and more than that, it's frictionless on all dimensions. You can essentially, unless you there's exceptions for that, but if you do it right, you can basically make it frictionless in terms of time. You can conduct micropayment with very, very little cost of overhead. And most of all, because it's always consolidated, meaning always adding up, and always reconciled, meaning always checked, you really know there is also very little or almost no cost of correction, because the whole way this thing is calculating and booking, it leaves no room for errors.
Yeah, so you cannot do reversals either. What you would have to do is create another transaction to correct if there have been any issues. But you have the original, then you have one to correct the other. So all of it is there. That's why it's very transparent.
Yes, and this is the special case about industrial blockchain as opposed to the pure crypto. So the pure DeFi space, nobody cares really who you are. You got your wallet, you got your address, the money is in there, who cares who you are? But in corporate environments, we have to pay tax. We are audited, we are regulated. It simply doesn't work. So any regulated company that you know that has a company register will have to do this industrial blockchain approach, because anything else would be considered illegal. Okay, next.
Exactly. This leads to a problem, right, of digital identities. And guys, as Asma started, right, if whenever you have questions, you can unmute or of course use the chat, as I said already. You have not to wait for a Q&A session at the end or something like that, right? Really ask directly.
Yeah. And this is, I am now old enough to know that meme. And internet is, when it comes to service delivery, let's say commerce, online beats, you know, manual or physical any time of the day. At least that's how I posit it. It's more efficient, it's faster, it's more often correct, it has less errors. So it just beats physical on every level. The only thing where online is really, really weak, and this is something that we don't even consider a problem, is identity. So that's what it means here. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. You're a dog, you're on the internet, you pretend you're I don't know who. You can basically conduct international business, get yourself a whole community following you, become famous. Nobody's ever seen how you look because you're probably just an ugly dog. So that's what that thing means here. And that is the key one weakness that the internet has, and we never considered that a problem because it's not wired in our brain, because humans were given faces and eyes for that. So we never consider identity a problem. I look at a face and I got the identity problem solved. Even by telephone, more or less, I recognize the voice, I got the identity problem solved, and our whole regulated environment is that telephone number. I know that telephone number is that company. So we never think of that as a problem. But if you got a dumb computer that basically needs to completely autonomously decide and doesn't have access to the physical world, because that's the one thing they don't have. A computer doesn't have access to the physical world. Then you have a serious gap here. Okay, next.
Mhm.
So, and as I said, it is quintessential for any business. If any of you works in a business or has a business, this is, you cannot start your business if you don't know your customers. That's pretty much it. So what does that mean? I need correctly verified personal information about the person, about each person. That would mean at least your identifier. So the US is a little bit of an exception. You don't have these national ID documents. So I think people use the driving license or social security number or what. Most other countries that I know in the world have a national ID document, which is the identity document of reference. And then you have credentials. So identity is just really who you are. So Asma gets one identity. And it's very important to understand also the difference between an account, which yes, you can verify this account belongs to Asma. That's easy, but Asma could have 10 or 15 of those accounts. And that is not an identity. An identity is a one-to-one relationship between the identity and Asma, which means Asma has one identity and not 100 identities. And the way to really, there's a lot of discussions around this, which in my personal opinion are completely useless, because you can very much simplify it, just solve the voting problem. You need an identity in a way that allows you to vote. If you would use these so-called identities that are accounts, well, I go to the one voting booth, I present my one account, they verify it's really Harry, they let me vote. I go to the next door booth, I present them my account, they again verify it's Harry, and I vote again. Obviously, that's not how it should be. And the only way to avoid that is that either you do a one-to-one identity or you use these archaic primitive method where I basically put some ink on your thumb or some of that, like developing countries do it, and basically try to somehow figure it out through that. But identity, real identity, is always one-to-one. For instance, in the vehicle world, every car in the world has the so-called VIN. It's universal, it's always the same, it's universally recognized, and it will never ever change. Every banking institution in the world has the legal entity identifier since the financial crisis, which is precisely for that purpose. So that's another important thing to really remember. And every national ID document, you get one of them. You get one national ID document, not two, precisely so that when you go to the voting booth, they know once they put that number in, you cannot vote again because you have only one of those. And the credentials are just on top of that. The credentials are qualifications. Your billing relationship could be a credential. Also, do you have a driving license? Yes or no. Do you have a permit to carry a gun? Yes or no, etc. And on the company side, you got what's called qualifications. Are you allowed to handle explosives? Are you allowed to operate financially in the European Union? So those are credentials which are added to the identity, very much like in your wallet, you have your identity document, but you also have your membership card for that club, you had your bonus cards from the local supermarket, you got your health insurance card, and those will be considered credentials. And that all together is, there's the new set of technologies which has been evolving, which is also decentralized, which is also based on cryptology, so on very smart encryption exchange systems, where basically things can be verified in a very secure way to basically verify this. Okay, next.
There's one question from Brand Mingle, right? Thanks for that. What impact does blockchain have on cybersecurity?
No, there is no direct relation between the two. You need cybersecurity in either way. You need blockchain is a secure system. The question in itself, it's hard to answer. Cybersecurity applies to everything. Blockchain is blockchain. It's not directly related to terms. So So what is a decentralized identity? So identity and identity document should be clear. Decentralized identifiers is something that the World Wide Web Consortium is standardizing right now. So they are the very same people that gave us HTTP and HTML. And essentially think of it as a URL. You know, like you go to www.microsoft.com, that's a URL. So think of it like a URL. It's called a URI because it's not a universal resource locator. It's a universal resource identifier, but for all practical purposes, that's the same. So you get this URI, this URL, as a person, or as a device, or as a company. And just like the www.microsoft.com, it can be resolved, meaning if you type it into these name resolution systems, it will find that address and connect to it. And then you can query it and interact with it, just like you can query it and interact with any kind of website. But the beauty here is, it is from the beginning, because this is a very new protocol, it is from the very beginning designed totally secure. So all of it is based on public key, private key encryption. So if you want to take the URL analogy a step further, it's very much the same as HTTPS for personal unique identifiers. And you take these and assign them to cars, to companies, and to people. And then you use so-called trust providers that sign off on the fact that they have verified through a physical video identification or similar, or a ceremony where the car and the hardware device containing the identity were brought together in a trusted workshop. And therefore, that was the KYC for vehicles, know your vehicle. And then they would be signed off on. So you really know, okay, this is not only an identity, but it is also a verified identity. And why is it called decentralized? Because you get to keep it. It is it's in your ownership. It is in your what's called a wallet on the phone. So if you keep all of those identity and all of those credentials, they are in your local phone in case you're a person, they're in your cloud wallet in case you're a company, and they're in your hardware wallet in case you're a car or a charging stations. So they are decentralized, and they are self-sovereignly governed and owned by whoever that identity belongs to, which specifically means I can decide when anything should be, when this identity may be used, and which attributes of this identity I want to reveal or not. So when I want to rent a car, I obviously have to agree to giving out my name, giving out my address, and giving out my driving license. I can refuse, but then I'm not going to get the car. So it's a free choice. But if I want to get the car, that's what I'll have to give. And that's actually the very same as in the real business world. However, it's just easier and faster and fully automated. And by the way, much more secure than any other system you can possibly think of at this moment in time. Okay.
So Harry, just to kind of ask another question on this, because I just moved, okay, from locations here in Michigan. And it was easy for some companies like Apple for me to make a change in one area, then everything else was synced. Is that something that they use like that, where traditional companies, I would say traditional banks and all that, I had to go to each account and make the changes?
Well, it's for you as a user, it's very similar in the case if you go to Amazon or Apple, maybe Google or Facebook. The result for you as a user is pretty much the same, because they are completely connected throughout the world. So they will always have a golden record on you because they're very smart in handling your account actually. But they do that by being centralized. So they just do that by, in all your interactions with the many thousands of actual companies that are delivering services to Amazon, Amazon swallows the customer relationship, just like Uber swallows the customer relationship, while the drivers are actually delivering the services. And then based on that, they know everything about you, which is why they have such valuable data and can grow so fast and hold such incredible power. Decentralized technologies try to achieve the same result, but without having control in the hands of these one single player who once they got this critical mass, they become quite predatory in how much value they suck out of the system. And it becomes very, very unpleasant for everybody else in those industries, because essentially their basically value add is being sucked out. So the result for the user is very much the same. However, the result for the industry is totally different because the industry suffers from players like Amazon and the likes, whereas these decentralized technologies allow the industry to keep the customer, which is the most important relationship in business. The moment you let a centralized platform take your customer in the name of making things easier for you, you lost, because you lost control. You lost control of the most valuable asset you have, your customer connection, and your customer relationship. They give you a little bit of additional revenue at first, and for that, you basically lost the future of your enterprise.
Yeah. Guys, I have two questions in the chat. One from Katarina, right? If PayPal is also an example for that, right? Right now you said Amazon and so on. Is that a similar picture or comparison?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. And then also a second question from Niranjana, hopefully I pronounce it right. Would the trust provider to also write the identity of the company or car be decentralized?
There's lots of, again, this comes back to this philosophical discussion. It cannot be decentralized. Again, if you sign a contract and you go and buy a house, there is only one identity confirmed by one party that will be allowed when they verify, when the notary verifies your identity, he will always go back to the government ascertained identity. When the car rental company checks your driving license, he's not going to rely on some social web, self-sovereign web, which you built up in the background and say, oh, Harry says Sophia is a wonderful driver, and Sophia's got 5,000 followers that give her 10 points or 10 stars on her driving skills. Still, as a rental company, I cannot care about that. Forget that, go away, show me your driving license. Which means the trust provider for the driving license is the vehicle authority. And that's the end of that discussion at that point in time, because the facts of the matter are the facts of the matter. There's a lot of philosophical and hope, and we would like the world to be different discussions, which are beautiful to have, but they don't lead to pragmatic result if you want to execute business now. So no, when you want to execute business in a regulated environment, unfortunately, the trust providers will have to be like trees, like on a larger scale, what you have in corporate directories, or actually quite similar to, again, URL, what you got in the browsers. If you look at these HTTPS, when you have secure websites, how do you know that it's really that website? It's also a hierarchy. So Microsoft.com can confirm that Germany.Microsoft.com is indeed Germany.Microsoft.com by signing off as Microsoft.com against Germany.Microsoft.com or France.Microsoft.com. But the fact that Microsoft.com is Microsoft.com can only be signed off by the certificate authority that holds the authority to vouch for the .com domains. And .com and .net and .org in their turn are ultimately dependent on the trust authorities. Mozilla is one of them that has been given the right to be the trust authority for root. And root is the final hierarchy in the center, and nobody's going to get around that. You can do self-certified HTTPS, but it will break your browser, and I sure as hell do not recommend you to do banking over it.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, we have also more questions in the chat. So thank you, Manu, you answered already, because Darina asked again, if the ID is only for a person or vehicle. Yeah, and then Manu answered already, no, the ID is really, it could be a person, could be a company, or could be, as Harry took the example of a vehicle, for example, right?
Yes.
It's right understanding, right, Harry? Yeah.
Okay, next, please. This is probably too much detail here. So at the key of all of this, and that pretty much explains it. So any industrial application, any industrial platform where you want to automate the commerce, where you want to automate the transactions, can pretty much be handled by this identity triangle. Coming out of Daimler, we called it CCC because it rhymes much better, company, customer, car. In fact, what we mean by this is enterprise, company, human, customer, and any device, car. So the charging station or the container ship in case of logistics, the trailer, probably even the parking lot. So anything where you connect the device that you interact with, they would all have identities, and then you would have trust providers. So in Germany, for a human, it could be identity providers, it could be Schufa, that's a credit scoring system, it could be the Bundesdruckerei they give me, they are the ones that print the identity documents and national identity providers. For companies, it could be in Germany again, the Bundesanzeiger, which is our federal registry, the Kreditreform, which is the German scoring system. It could also be the legal enterprise identifiers, which is a standard which is coming out now, which seems highly promising. On the vehicles, it's the National Vehicle Authority, always centralized, because only the National Vehicle Authority ultimately is in charge of approving cars to basically operate on the street. And then as you conduct your business, all you need to do is just basically get signatures from each. You need to verify these identities. Then you need to verify whatever credentials they have. Is this company allowed to operate as a trucking operator in Arizona? That's a credential. Is this human allowed to drive a Maybach? So for instance, we don't give Maybach to 18-year-old men, for instance, because the accident profile is simply too high. So we have certain minimum requirements to give a Maybach for rental to. So those are credentials that need to be fulfilled, and those are credentials that need to be verified before the car is given out. And for the vehicle, obviously what you need it for is when the vehicle sends you data about its route, about its state of charge, about how much fuel it has, about is the door open, is the door closed, because nowadays vehicles are very much connected computers. Then again, it needs to be identified. I need to know which vehicle this is, and I need to know that nobody's spoofing me. And I need to know that once this data is in my database and I use it later to give you an invoice and you say, no, that's not correct, you tampered with the data. If this data has been signed by an identity, we can keep this very simple. All right, you say I tampered with it, I'll take out the original data, we both run the signature algorithm. If the signature algorithm breaks, I cheated. If the signature algorithm didn't play, you better pay. So it's that simple. That's what these cryptographic protocols basically provide. It's not the cryptography, which is a high-level word. They just take dispute out of the picture, because there is no wasn't me, no, I didn't do this, yes, you did, yes, you signed, we have proof, you're not going to talk your way out of it, this will be recognized in court. So that's a key point in efficient transactions, because the moment you allow discussions, dispute, clawbacks, you need much more overhead in the operations of things. But if you completely rule that out, like blockchain does, then actually you're able to operate very, very, very efficiently and scale much better. Next.
So, Harry, if we could stay on this, because Darina has some additional questions, which are very, very valid. If we go to the previous slide, just to kind of have everyone understand this, first it starts with us humans, because last time I always say, take me to the Star Wars world. It's us humans interacting or building an ecosystem. And then what is in that ecosystem? So in here, the example of a vehicle is just an example, Darina. So it could be anything else. It doesn't have to be a vehicle. It could be a building, it could be a scooter, it could be anything. But for bloXmove, you are correct. We are trying to build an urban mobility ecosystem, not specifically a vehicle itself, but it could be anything regarding that urban mobility and helping us build that ecosystem that connects everything together.
Exactly. So
any thoughts on this, Harry? Because that's, yeah.
Could be
Yes,
the cars, could be
correct,
the e-scooter.
Yeah.
So it's really a big, really different, and this is a beauty in it, right? As Harry said, due to the technology, you can really create one DID, really one specific DID per, for example, device, right? As also Manu said in the chat, let's take it as device maybe, right? Then it's a bit wider. Yeah, but thanks for asking, Darina. It's exactly the right question. Yeah. So now we have more questions. Katharina is asking if this is for contracts, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's important. Basically, the contract, if the key, what is the purpose? The purpose is to be able to deliver a service, make sure that the service is signed, and do all the transaction processing up to the booking, up to the invoice, up to the settlement, and up to the payment fully automatically. And at the start of this lies the consent agreement or the contract. So yes, this is important to execute contracts in a fully automated way, without without possibility of dispute, and with full trust that whatever has been transacted here is correct and true, and everybody gets their fair share.
Good. We should move on, I guess. I have the
Yes, so pretty much this is now how this would work in case of for our mobility blockchain platform. So how does now these identity and the blockchain, how do they work together? Well, on the blockchain, you essentially do the bookkeeping and you do the invoicing, if you wish, to keep the language on the business level. So, and on the decentralized identity level, you make sure that whatever you're getting in as record has been verified, has been signed, is correct and is true and cannot be faked. That's what you do with the two. So how does that work? And the following is the most simple example. So I'll first start with, in general, what is the general term for a contract? Please note that the contract lies not in the paper and the contract lies not with the lawyer. The following is a fully valid contract in all jurisdictions I know. Hey, Sophia, you want my car for the weekend, right? I am willing to give you that car for €100. If you are willing to pay me that €100, you bring it back before Sunday, 6 p.m., and you make sure it comes back fully fueled. Are you in agreement, Sophia? And then, Sophia, please say yes.
Yes, I agree, but it is a bit too expensive, but I will agree. It's fine. I like you.
Okay, I like you back. So we shake hands on this, and if we have a witness in the room who saw that, that's a contract. Now, take that example now. So there's two identities, we shake hands, the witness obviously saw the shaking hands, that's the signature. So in our case, the identity and the signature and the confirmation of the offer and accept is all done in the digital identity and verified credential. Then you take this and the blockchain acts as the notary. It takes these unbroken chains of cryptographic proofs, puts them together into a blockchain transaction, adds the timestamp, and then the blockchain acts as the witness. Me, blockchain, hereby certify that I saw the verified Sophia Rödiger sign off on the offer, verifiably signed by the verified Harry Behrens, wherein which Sophia will rent Harry's car for €100, even though she grumbles and mumbles about it, but she does, and she will then also return the car fully fueled. And boom, that goes on the blockchain now. So now I know that what I put on the blockchain is actually true. Because if I didn't do all of this big story about identity and credentials and all of that blah, 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 how would I know that it's really true what happened here? I could say, no, 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 Sophia, you owe me 200. Or Sophia could say, hey, Harry, you said you liked me, you lent it to me for free. So basically, how do we ascertain all of that? How do we get this? I misunderstood, blah, blah. How do we get that out of the world? That you can only do that by making sure that you verify what happens in the real world. So this is how the two connect to each other. So you got this decentralized identities, decentralized verification, and associated protocols that pretty much allow you to verify physical things. And then you bring them together because it's all digital. The protocols are very closely connected. There's a lot of work being done to make them work really hand in hand. And you anchor these identities and you anchor the signature and you anchor, meaning you link and you fix them on the blockchain. And the blockchain at the end of the day just acts as I keep history in a completely secure way, time by time by time. And I just state, I confirm that this is what happened at this time, boom. And that goes into the blockchain. And if you think that through, then if based on that, I now invoice you on my distributed ledger, I got a beautiful closed circle. Because you know that on the money side, on the calculation side, the blockchain is secure, but you also know that we calculated based on the correct contractual agreement, based on the correct terms and conditions, and not based on wrong assumptions. And that is the full cycle of fully automated business transactions based on this set of decentralized technologies. So DID plus blockchain, that is truly at the very center of industrial blockchain. Add smart devices. The buzzwords here is IoT, Internet of Things. Then you got basically DID, blockchain, and IoT. And that is those three technologies converging are now basically unleashing this almost revolution of industrial and software creativity, which is now coming out.
So
and
Harry,
that, yeah.
Because you're on that thought, and there is a good question from Katarina. Actually, I also had that same question in the past. Was this the booking or the bookkeeping?
Say again? No,
Is
bookkeeping. No, I'm when I use the word book here, book as in ledger, as in bookkeeping. as in ledger in distributed ledger. So sorry if I didn't make that clear. I'm not talking about booking as in reservation. I'm talking in booking as in you put it into your accounting record. It's an invoice. It's a transaction. That's what I mean with booking.
Yeah, I think booking also in the US sometimes means like data entry. So initial data entry, and then bookkeeping is maintaining those transactions. So to answer Katerina's question, it is both data entry and the bookkeeping, right?
But basically here, the data entry specifically towards the bookkeeping. So I'm not, so it's all about here. I mean, after all, this is about counting the money, right? I mean, no matter what we're doing here, we're essentially counting the money and we're proving that the invoices and the payments are always correct. That's all this does, right? So all of everything you enter here is always related in one way or the other about to an obligation, to a service, and to money due, invoices due, money being put into the accounting, financial liability being settled, paid. So it's all about that.
Yeah, super. And from content side, we are, I think right now it was an intense impulse. So let's focus on more questions in the chat, right? So guys, you have a few more minutes for questions if you want to note them down. And then we move on with a short feedback. But first of all, we want to pick out a few more questions. George, you ask, can you give some examples of some DID trust providers who will be the certificate authorities for the real world?
That is a literally billion-dollar question, because that's a market now. There's hundreds of millions, if not billions already, of venture capital flowing into there. It's very hard to say. My guess is ultimately it will converge to at least government-regulated entities. So there's big players. There's a company like Verimi. They are not yet using this technology, but they're converging to it. It's a company that a lot of German industrials basically invested into. There is the post offices in Germany that put out fingers through something called Postident. There's venture company like Helix or Yoti that are trying to get into that market. There's a company called Yes. I think they're based in Switzerland, but they're doing quite strong business now in Germany. So that's a market that is very, very tightly fought over. Telecom companies have a big, they haven't started yet. I do not understand why, because they're very well placed to do it. Of course, Facebook, if Libra or Diem happens, they would automatically be the identity provider if the regulators wouldn't push them back. They couldn't be beaten. Apple, the same. If Apple wanted to be identity provider, then there's nothing to stop them. So they can only be stopped, which they will be, hopefully, but they could immediately do it. I cannot see, if I look around here in this very not digital country of mine, I cannot see those offices that currently handle identity. I cannot see them do this. This will have to be done on a technical level, and it will probably be new venture companies that will ultimately subdue themselves to regulation and handle it. Again, telecommunications and of course banking. Any of the banking companies, especially the retail bankers, are extremely well placed for that, because anyway, because both telco and banking have already done KYC on huge customer base. So if they were willing to offer that as a service to the industry, they would really give a jump start to the whole economy.
Harry, before we go to other questions, Katerina also had, after you described, well, thank you, she said, for the description of booking or bookkeeping, but she's asking, is it basically cash control?
Companies do not count cash, Katarina. If you look at if a company tells you, I have $2 billion of assets and I made profit of 150 million next year, nobody cares about the cash. So nobody looks at the cashier system. It's completely irrelevant. So what is being counted always in company and national level and in industry is always the book money. So it's accounting control, if you want to put a name to it. Pure blockchain, Bitcoin, is very much the opposite of that, because Bitcoin is actually not a business transaction, in the sense that a business transaction always has two legs. I give you a service and you give me the money. That's the point which I try to point out. If I send 100,000 euro to your bank account as a company, you cannot do anything with it because the first leg is missing. So Bitcoin doesn't do accounting, it just does cash. But industrial world, you need to apply the concepts of Bitcoin, of blockchain, of distributed ledger. And what you need to do is you need to do the bookkeeping. And the bookkeeping is what you need to control, because the bookkeeping is where you count your money. Companies count their money in the ledger. They don't count their money in the cash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's another good question, Harry from Warmup. When it comes to the ecosystem play around the blockchain, right? What would you say, what are the ingredients that the adoption could really, float in the future, right? Is it governance structure, government? What is it? Who can push also the development?
I believe governance is the derivative correct answer. What do I mean by that? The incentives, ultimately, if you want success in a newly emerging market, the only way you can do that if the people that you need are incentivized by themselves, not because you ask nicely, but be incentivized out of their own self-interest to join. Once you get that somehow, once you structure, there's a very famous saying, show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome. I'm a very firm believer in that. So structure the incentives for your players that you need on the ecosystem in a way that they, out of their own self-interest, want to pursue that self-interest, and you win. And of course, then that's why I said the derivative answer is, in order to structure that and make it legal and put a contractual frame and a corporate frame around it, the answer on how you finalize this, how you write this down contractually, is the governance structure. So yes, the governance structure will ultimately express how the ecosystem will govern itself. That is why in every white paper, at least in every serious white paper in the token economy, you always have the governance of the token being a central and core piece of how they basically structure what happens to the token value and what happens to the money that goes in there. And also in any decentralized way, the governance is key. But before the governance, I would put structure first, the incentives, so everybody knows why they are here, and then govern. Not put governance first, and then, yes, we have a governance system now, but who wants to play? So first attract the players and then bring the governance. So first start playing and then give the rules.
Yeah, super. We have time for 2 more questions, but before I would ask you if you can screen the QR code, right? Again, you will be linked to the Mentimeter survey, and would be nice to get a feedback from you, really what's in your gut feeling right now. And first people started already. I show it to you in a minute, but I let the QR code right now in the front that you can scan it, because we would like to have your feedback, as I said, as first reaction, right? And yeah, we have also
I'll take your Joe's question, because it's actually very much
exactly.
So yes, very much. I try to actually get to that with the triangle. It's very much also for 2 companies, and the way it is done, I mentioned the wallet story. So the identities are put in the wallets in the car. It would be a hardware wallet. It's a box in the car. In a case of a user, it's software within my mobile phone. And in terms of company, it's called a cloud wallet, at least usually. So it is software that is, logically speaking, very much the same that I would hold in my mobile phone. It's just from a security context. It's operated differently, but it also has company identity, company public key, company private key in it. And then you would have the softwares signing contracts for that company based on DID and verified credentials, put the signature of that company onto the contract. So yes, 2 companies, most definitely applicable. More than that, essentially necessary.
Good. Super. We have the link again in the chat if the QR code is not working. And yeah, are there more questions?
I think there was one from Darina that said, if the government eventually gets involved, where is the decentralization?
Yes, that is a
Good
very
question.
wide, yes, very open question. It lies more on the philosophy and the policy level of things, because there's optimistic and there's pessimistic views on it. There's also different mindsets. There's the freewheeling crypto libertarian or crypto anarchist point of view, and then there's more the etatist government, the primate of the politics school of thought. I would see this question so wide. It is very hard to say, but from my personal perspective, unfortunately, I see the rule givers stepping on strong and hard. Now that value is being very real and the value is tremendous now, unfortunately, I think it's going to get regulated faster than we should hope for.
Yeah, we have more questions. Maybe also Alex, you're asking why Daimler sold this software or handed it over to an external company. I guess I can start, but Harry, please feel free to jump off with your thought on that. Alex, this wasn't a decision. I think we prepared it from the very beginning, because if you think open software and decentralized networks, it is hard if you have one owner, one very strong in German Platzhirsch, right? So big player in the middle, and you need a different dynamic if you really want to bring that technology to the next level. So it was really clear from a strategic perspective that we have to do it outside, especially when it comes to dynamic, to finding the right talents and so on. But Harry, maybe also your thoughts.
Yes, I mean, the quintessential part is this is ecosystem. It should be obvious. I mean, we didn't really get into it yet. When we talk specifically about bloXmove, it'll be clear. Its ecosystem means it'll involve many, many, many different players. And it's also a platform game. So which means ultimately it should converge on one shared platform. Now, if you're any big player with a very strong brand identity, that's good for you and your partners, but you will have a very hard time getting other players with a similar strong brand identity, a similar sense of pride, to basically say, I'm willing to use your platform. I mean, just imagine basically Pepsi doing a platform and asking Coca-Cola to join it. So it needs to be neutral. And that is one of the key reasons. And that is also, if you look at the press release, that is also what Carmen Roth-Schäfer, I wish she would be here. That's truly another woman in tech. But Carmen Roth-Schäfer, the CTO of Daimler Mobility, also said, it was almost clear from the very beginning that yes, we can develop it, we can think it through, we can incubate it. But if you really want this to be successful and grow in that exponential way that it should and can grow, it needs to be neutral. And that's, I would say, the strongest argument.
Yes, exactly. So with regards to the time, we have first feedback here. So I guess you can see it. I share it again. And thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the great feedback. And especially if you spend an hour on the weekend with us, it's super nice to see that it was valuable. So thank you very much. And also your first topics, you preferred, so to say, for the next sessions, right? So we definitely promise you to create nice stories around that. Right now we have two topics which are really have the same weight. So let's see what we do for the next session, but definitely one of those. So thank you very much. And please, the link is in the chat. So I leave the survey open. Yeah, and when we stop our session here, of course, you can add your feedback also after the Zoom call here. So I would say we move to the last page. And it's only, I would say we have to say thank you, right? It was really dynamic today. Thank you very much.